is my mic okay?
Is this good in my face right here?
Can you see his beautiful face?
I can see your beautiful face.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yes.
That's what matters.
Most of it.
How about now?
Now we lost you.
Sorry, sir. That's
Creative
you
here.
don't want to do
Recording.
that. Yes, recording.
Can see 0, 2, save changes.
A little bit ASMR.
ASMR. Let me move that over here so that it's more where you want me to be. Okay. So good. So great. Okay, people, for real. Be natural.
Oh,
Be natural.
okay.
Be good.
Be
Don't-
natural.
don't be bad.
Aw,
So much pressure.
what's the fun in that? What's the fun in not being bad? Just a little bit of bad's okay. Just a little
Spice.
salt. Yeah, it's just to be a little spicy.
I'm so bad.
Oh, are you real spicy?
I go to the 15 or less aisle with 17 items.
Really? Because I go with like 25.
Wow. We're going to get canceled before we even start. Okay. Let's go.
Yes. All right, y'all. This is Nina. It's nice to see you again. This is Candid and Curious, a little podcast I created so I can have some really interesting talks with really interesting people. So I love to get candid on here. I'm the curious one. My guest is always the candid one. And we just kind of talk and learn about people's passions. So I am here at Gemini Studios or Gemini Productions with the amazing Chibi.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. My name is Chiquita Banana. You peeled my banana. Prepare to die.
Oh my goodness.
Always happy to be here with you, Nia.
I love being here with you, Chibi. So Chibi has been amazing at helping me get this podcast off the ground and into production. And so I'm super grateful to be here at Gemini Productions.
Happy to have you.
Oh, yeah. So I am super excited about today's guest. We've got someone here who is a local business owner. He owns his own firm. He's an attorney, right? And so I think sometimes when we talk about attorneys, we may have certain thoughts on that. But I think today we're here to just kind of talk about what that actually means for our guest. And yeah, so our guest today is Mr. Steven Lopez. Say hello.
Hello.
Hi, happy to have you on the show.
Hi, thanks. Thanks so much for the invite and the opportunity to come on here and talk.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your practice. So you are located here in San Antonio.
Yeah, we're here in San Antonio. We have a small firm. It's just 2 lawyers and staff. Have been in business about 4 years. So that's my main gig. That's what I do. I'm also an adjunct professor at St. Mary's Law School.
Yeah.
So those are my 2 passions. And, opening my business 4 years ago was a big step for me. So I myself am learning about just being a small business entrepreneur, which is really interesting to me. I've been a lawyer for quite some time now, over 10 years. So, that's has fueled me. But until recently, I just started doing the small business thing. So that's kind of where my curiosity lies right now.
Yeah. That's exciting though. It's super exciting to start your own thing, right? So, but also challenging.
It's exciting. It's nerve-wracking, especially when you start taking on staff and having to worry about payroll and getting into the business side of things is something that I never had to do before in my legal career. And it's certainly a challenge, and it's, you stay up late with anxiety and just worrying about, these people are dependent on me now, right? It's not just you going to work and how your work directly affects you and how you live. Now I'm affecting other people, right? Other people that are depending on me. So that is an additional pressure that fuels me a lot, but it's also, like I said, an interesting challenge now. It's a different wrinkle to what I've done in my career. So I'm enjoying it.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you said, so you've been with your own practice for 4 years, but you've been lawyering for 10.
Yeah, I got out of law school in 2012. So I think about 12, 13 years now.
That's awesome.
It'll be 13 years in May. So learned a lot, certainly about the law, right? I had some great mentors in my life and still do have a great group of people that help me with the legal stuff. And now with the business stuff, a lot of solo and small law firm lawyers who've gone before me who are, probably, 5 to 10 years ahead of me on the curve. So, I definitely have my kitchen cabinet of people that I'm always reaching out to almost on a daily basis for advice, not only in the law, but in, small business stuff, hiring and firing, accounting, things like that.
Right. All the things that, we don't necessarily think about in the beginning, right?
Right.
So that's awesome. So because I do want to dive into what your practice means to you, but I kind of wanted to get started a little bit on why a personal injury, trial attorney, that's so specific.
Yeah. Well, I wish I had a more dramatic answer to give you, but honestly, my first passion when I first graduated college, 20 years ago, I moved out to LA. I thought I was going to do, some writing and acting and that kind of thing. And that was really my first passion. And, it's a hard business. I was out there for quite a long time, almost 10 years struggling, and finally, decided that I needed to have a career, right? My parents, didn't go to college. They sacrificed everything so that I could go to college and get this degree that was supposed to set me up. And, I was 30 years old, struggling actor in LA, bartending for a living, right? Mm-hmm. So I just felt, personally for me, it would have been just not a great way to pay forward the sacrifices that my family had made to give me this dream, right? To fulfill the dream of having somebody in the family go to college and setting me up in that way. So I felt personally a lot of pressure to move back and basically get my shit together, right? And so I went to law school very late. I started applying, on a whim at 30, and I didn't even start my first semester of law school till I think 32.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a kind of a roundabout journey for me to even get to law school, but you encounter people in this profession who knew they wanted to be lawyers right away. It was something I always wanted to be and always dreamed of. And it was always something that I had thought about, that I had in my hip pocket, but it wasn't a first passion for me. So, honestly, Nina, I wish I had a better story, but I was, broke, approaching 30 years old. What am I going to do? And, I was a theater guy, a writer. So, if you're a reader and a writer and like to be on stage, what is the profession that you can use those skills in some kind of way to build yourself a career, but also to help people. So that's really why I got into it, right? I said, well, I have these skills. My skills are X, Y, and Z. So now that translates into lawyering, but I didn't really fall in love with the law until, maybe halfway through law school, or even getting out, right? When I started to learn about really how you can impact your clients' lives and other people's lives. And that's what drives me now in my career. But it wasn't, I wish I could say it was a passion for being a lawyer since I was a little kid, but that wouldn't be the truth. I am who I am, and I have to live my truth. So I got in there, in a roundabout kind of way, but it's been very fulfilling for me so far.
That's awesome. Well, you are in the company of theater people.
Yes. So. Yeah. And, I have theater people in my family too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know Maricela Barrera is a big theater person. She's my cousin.
Why does that? It sounds familiar.
She's all over she's a rabble rouser. She likes to get in trouble and make waves in the theater community here in town. Yeah. So through her, I was on the board of some theater companies here for a little while. So I try to stay connected to the theater crowd a little bit. It's very interesting, but it's its own drama and its own thing here. So I'm more of just a fan at this point.
That's really cool. I went to school. I have a couple of different degrees, but one of them is dance performance and choreography. So a lot of, and I'm a huge advocate of hiring artists, even if it's not like in an artist job, so to speak, right? Yeah. You had a passion for the arts, but then you moved into being an attorney. But I feel like for me, it's kind of not the same, but I always feel like artists have so much more to lend to even like an outside career, just because of the grit that we develop over time, because of who we are and because of how hard we have to work. and not that other professions don't work hard, but I mean, like as a dancer, like we problem solve all the time. Right. And so like as an artist, do you feel like that part of you bleeds over and lends well to your new, profession as an attorney?
Sure. I mean, absolutely. It's the grit that you talk about, right? But it's problem solving. And actually, it's funny that you use that phrase because I feel like that is my main job, right? Is solving a problem. And they even say that to law students, right? It's not about memorizing the law, learning the law. It's about learning how to find a problem, analyze it, and solve that, right? And you do that in creative ways, right? There's many people that have gone before you and they do it a certain way, and you can certainly do that way, but it helps your clients and it helps you if you're, to think a little, to use the cliche, to think a little bit outside the box, right? I saw a speech by a very successful attorney last summer, and he said, if you want results that no other attorney is getting, then you have to do things that other attorneys aren't doing, right? If you're doing the same thing that everybody's doing, then your results and the way you represent your clients is going to be the same and you're going to get the same outcomes. But I think that was good advice for anything, right? If you want results that are different than anybody else's results, then you have to do something different than anybody else is doing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's always, I have found like the best way to do things. Like you have to think outside of the box.
Right. And it's almost better to have limited resources, right? Because it forces you to get creative.
Absolutely. Yeah. Limitations can produce a lot of creativity. I'm kind of curious. So out of all of the things that you could have chosen to be an attorney for, you chose personal injury. What was your kind of thought process behind that? And why did you choose that avenue?
So I've dabbled a little bit in everything. I was fortunate to get a really good job out of law school at a big personal injury firm in Dallas. By the time I ended law school, that's where I wanted to be. But, during law school, I wanted to be a criminal attorney, right? Criminal defense attorney, because that's just what everybody sees on TV, right? And so when I teach, students coming into law school, you discover they don't really have exposure to what a civil attorney is, right? Or a contracts attorney or wills and estates, or just the law is so huge, right? And you really have to specialize. So I always thought I was going to be a criminal defense attorney, right? And through, I'm a big mock trial person, and that's what I teach at the law school, and that's how my legal career started. And it was through that I met some really talented civil attorneys who had a lot of success and just really showed me how you can help people in a different way, right? It's not always helping people accused of a crime isn't the only way you can help people. Ordinary people have different problems. And so that's how I got into it, and then just have found it really rewarding over my career to help people, because ordinary people need lawyers to help them navigate the system, right? It's really hard, and really you see yourself as an advocate fighting against, it's companies or the government or some overly resourced entity that is trying to either take advantage of ordinary people or really that just aren't helping them, right? Like it's hard when you get in a car wreck, right? It's hard when you are wronged in some way financially, and it really affects people. And, the average American is, one major medical bill away from bankruptcy.
Absolutely.
Right? And so they need people to help them. And as a personal injury or contingency fee lawyer, that's the only way people can get help, right? Most of my clients are in, car wrecks, and they, have a $5,000, $2,000 medical bill. They don't have health insurance. What am I going to do? I'm hurt. And the only way to help those people is to take it on a contingency fee basis, where we don't charge anything out of pocket to start a case. We don't charge for consultations. And, they can come to us and have a case with no money out of their pocket. And it's really the only way that they can get better or even handle injuries, right? Oftentimes it's when there's a dispute about who's at fault in a crash, that's an obvious way that you think somebody needs a lawyer, right? But more often than not, it's when an insurance company is trying to take advantage of somebody that their insured person has hit, or even their own customers, right? I mean, you'd think that insurance companies would just take care of people after they've been paying premiums for years and years and years and years. And now I finally need help from my own insurance company, and they're trying to dictate which doctors I see or how much I can spend or whether I was at fault or not, right? So people really do need people in my profession to help them, because they're up against a Goliath, right? The biggest companies in the world are insurance companies, right? Because it's mandated by the state and by laws that we have this insurance, right? Like we have to required by law to have automobile insurance, but nothing really is there to protect us when that same company that we've been paying years after years wants to take advantage of us, right? And that's where I come in as a lawyer.
No, I think that's so powerful because I know in your bio, it says that you're an award-winning attorney, but you also grew up in the Rio Grande area?
I did. I'm from Harlingen, Texas, which is in the Valley. So yeah, that's where I grew up. I think when people ask where you're from, it's always, for me, it's where you went to high school, right? For me, those are the most formative years and kind of good or bad, that's kind of how you grew up, right? So there was a lot of experiences that I never had growing up there. I didn't eat sushi till I was in college, just little things like that. You're just like, man, I didn't even know that was a thing. And, so I'm really big on mentorship and really big on people exploring, because I feel like when I grew up, it was very limited career choice, right? I mean, we knew about lawyers and doctors, but like investment banking, like that was not even a thing that I ever heard of till I was in my late 20s. I'm like, oh, that was a cool career that wasn't even a possibility, right? Or even exposure to the arts on a professional level, right? Like growing up, it was just this is hobbies, everybody's hobby, but there was no really professional singers, dancers, artists really that I was exposed to anywhere that it was even a dream to make that a career until you left. You're like, oh, there's a whole industry out there, right? But so
I know in your bio it says like you grew up in the Valley, but you often came to San Antonio. Do you feel like because of where you grew up and because of like what you're explaining, because when I'm talking to you right now, a lot of what you're saying is I help the people, right? Like people that may not necessarily have the means to hire an attorney right off the bat. Does that have anything to do with like your upbringing or where you grew up? Or, I mean, because there's something that's fueling that. And I'm kind of interested in knowing what exactly that is.
Yeah, I suppose so. It's hard to psychoanalyze yourself, right? Yeah. And why you do care about the things that you care about. I don't know if it was, I can't really point to one specific experience, but I know that, the way I was raised, but, my dad was a Marine and he was very regimented about things and just kind of, was very serious about education, right? And I always think back to, I just look at my cousins, right? And some of the lives of the people that I knew growing up, and but for being born to my father, right, and my mother, those two specific people, I feel like I would have a very different life. And I can definitely look at my own life and feel very blessed for what I have and what I can do, and just being able to live a normal life without being worried, paycheck to paycheck, or being able to, take my young daughter on a vacation or not worry about where, she's going to have to go to school. I realize that's a blessing simply by knowing the people that I grew up with and the environment that I grew up with. Not that it was bad or dangerous or anything like that. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, there's limited opportunity sometimes. So just being very close to people who at this point in time have a very different life than I do, I just feel very, very blessed, and also very, pressured's not the word, right? Because I'm not running around feeling under pressure, but I do feel there's a responsibility to give back, right? Like I feel blessed, and that's part of the reason why I moved back from LA, right? Because like, okay, I've been given all these blessings, and here I am with these skills and this drive that are definitely a product of my upbringing. And I felt that, for lack of a better word, like guilt, right? If I just used that for myself in selfish pursuits. And so it just came back and decided, okay, what's a career that I could help people? And I love San Antonio. San Antonio for me, right, growing up in the Valley, like many people from the Valley, was always the big city, right? And so I always thought I was going to end up here. In law school, all my internships were here. So I had internships at Legal Aid here in San Antonio, at law firms here in San Antonio, and really always thought this was going to be the home of my career and my future. I just happened to get a job that I couldn't turn down in Dallas. So I did that for a couple of years and then just had to come back because I always felt this is where I was going to be. People ask that question, why did you choose San Antonio quite often? And, that history for me was very impactful. But also, I knew what it was like just being a lawyer in Dallas. It just wasn't as welcoming. The legal community here is smaller and it's more nurturing. I always tell people that it's a choice about where you practice. Young law students often say, where should I go to law school? And I said, well, if you can get into these top schools, obviously go there. But beyond the top 20, 25 law schools, pick a city you want to live in. And that's where their connections are going to be. And for me, that city was always San Antonio. Everybody always asks Barack Obama, like, why he chose Chicago as his legal home. He's from Hawaii. He said, well, in Chicago, I wasn't going to be the black guy, right? Because there's enough, African-American legal he was a lawyer, right? Professionals in Chicago, right? So he wasn't going to stand out or get criticized for that, right? He was just going to be judged on his own merits. And I always felt that was kind of similar to me in San Antonio, because I did try to become part of bar associations and organizations in Dallas. And if you want to be on the board of the, Dallas Trial Lawyers Association, get in line behind, 50 other white guys that have been there forever, been practicing forever, right? But when I moved to San Antonio, it was just easy to get plugged in for me right away, and was able to serve on that board almost immediately after moving to San Antonio. And that was a real blessing, because that just plugs you into the city and into business so much more. So there was definitely just a feeling of belonging more here in San Antonio. And you could call that due to insecurities or whatever, but it was just a sense of that's something that's taken off the plate, right? I don't have to worry about that being in San Antonio. And
so you said something that I want to kind of expand on a little bit. Like, you keep mentioning your students, and when people come to you and talk to you about, like, where should I go and what should I do? And I know that you teach at St. Mary's.
Yeah, I'm an adjunct professor at St. Mary's School of Law. So I've done that for 3 years now. So I just started, but it's one of the most rewarding things I do. And it's super time consuming and intense, but I just love it. I feel in another life, or if I could pay the bills teaching, I would do that. I really love working with young people a lot. It's just, it's a passion for me to help people in that way, to be able to inspire and to also convince them that the world's not on fire, right? That they're going to be okay. That kind of big brother aspect or fatherly aspect of teaching is it just makes me feel good.
Yeah, no, I love that. Teaching is it's really a gift.
Yeah,
it really is, right? Because we've all, I think, encountered teachers that shouldn't probably be teaching, and then we all have encountered those teachers that have made a huge difference in our lives, whether it be personal or professional. You've been in this profession for a little over a decade, and when did that happen for you that you were like, you know what, I'm going to teach. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to try this out, or I absolutely love it. So this is what I'm drawn to. Like, what kind of propelled you into this secondary teaching career?
So when I was out in LA struggling, I, did some substitute teaching and kind of got the taste for it then, but it's a totally different world. Trying to get into academia is so difficult, right? Teaching at the college level it's hard to get a gig. So some advice I give to students, right, is like, if you're going to go back, and I went back as a second career, but I was like, if you're going to pursue law school or business school or go to med school or some kind of like, be all about it, right? Don't, people are like, oh, I'm doing this, but I'm not really about it. I feel like that's a crutch, and that stems from insecurity. And if you're going to spend the money and take the time to do this thing, then do the damn thing, right? So when I was in law school, I just had a real serious internal talk with myself and said, like, dude, if you're going to go back to law school at 32 years old, like, you better be Mr. freaking law school, right? Like, this has got to be your gig 100%, like, go. So I did, right? I joined every club. I was on every time, I went out for everything, and just happened to be very successful, at least in the law school world, in mock trial, which is, fake trials that, there's tournaments, and there's a whole collegiate law school level it's wild that you're just never exposed to until actually you start teaching it. So I was very successful in law school and, helped some teams out at my alma mater, Baylor, but it really didn't turn the corner for me until I got recruited by the director at St. Mary's Law School, one of my mentors, one of my best friends, a person I love dearly, named AJ Bolito de Luna. He's the director of trial advocacy there. And, he invited me out for coffee and asked me if I wanted to start out as a volunteer coach with them. And that's how I got started with the St. Mary's. They call it the national team there. That's the mock trial team. But just very fortunate to have crossed paths with this just fantastic friend of mine who's really become a rock in my life. And through him, he's given me the opportunities and said, come and coach. And then, coach for a year. 'Cause I've been involved with them probably, over 5 years, 6 years, but just formally asked to be an adjunct. I think I've done it 3 years now, and hopefully I'm invited back. But that's how I got started.
No, I love that because I think, because you and I were talking yesterday, you mentioned something that I think is something that we should maybe bring up and talk about. So you talked about establishing relationships with people. And there's such a huge difference between like when you and I were younger and coming up in our careers and making these career moves, and the youth today and how they're doing that. I know that for a lot of our younger Gen Zers, it's a lot of screen time. And, growing up, I didn't really get a whole lot of that. And I know you didn't either. So what is the main difference that you see between students networking and establishing relationships now in their career versus what, maybe an older crowd maybe have done differently?
So for me, one of the biggest challenges is exactly what you said, right? I encounter a lot of young students, and my students now are probably 22, 23 years old, right? So they've grown up fully immersed in the internet and screen time, and that's just their life, right? So a lot of them don't have the interpersonal skills that I think are really necessary to succeed in any career, right? Much less the law, but just anywhere, right? The ability to pick up the phone or have a conversation, the courage to engage, right, without a screen between you. I'll never forget when I first moved back to Texas, I was at my buddy's house, and his little brother was living with him at the time, and we asked him to order a pizza at this like local place that didn't have an app, and he was just totally freaked out about like calling somebody to order a pizza, and we were just all sitting there just like gobsmacked, right, with our chins on the floor, like, what do you mean, dude? Like, call the pizza place and order. He was like, how do I do it? How do you do what? Call them and tell them you want a pizza. It was it was mind blowing, right? Like if there's not an app for something, a lot of kids struggle, right? If there's not a website that's telling them exactly what to do, if there's not a resource. So I feel like, that's affected just the way people communicate. And I think it's a symptom of our times, right? In our world. And I don't want to just poo-poo young people, right? Because I find myself doing that too, right? We are all now fully immersed with screens, and I feel that it's really a reason why, we're not getting along, right? People have just forgotten the ability to reach out to somebody and to humanize somebody and not only to learn something about that other person, but the realization that if that person just knew a little bit more about me, maybe we wouldn't be in this conflict, right? So in the law, it's what's called, right, an adversarial profession, right? I have somebody who's opposite me, doctors are fantastic and surgeons are amazing and everything, right? But when they're operating on someone, there's not another doctor who's equally talented, equally smart, trying to kill the patient that's on the table, right? So in my profession, what I do, it's conflict, right? It's conflict every day. It's adversarial. But it doesn't have to be incordial. It doesn't have to be disrespectful. We could disagree about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we're all human, right? And so the hardest part to teach students is, hey, man, if you pick up the phone and just call this person, instead of putting these demands in an email, instead of communicating in emails and through screens all the time, you might actually get something done, right? Like that's how things progress, is realizing the humanity in our adversaries and moving forward. What can we compromise on, right? It's problem solving. How can we problem solve together? I, love the quote from Roadhouse, right? The original Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, right? Well, his famous line is, be nice until it's time to not be nice, right? And that's just, I feel like that's the way we should live our lives, right? That's how we try to run our firm constantly. Like every year we do this like firm recap, and I've got the Roadhouse video clip in my PowerPoint, and I won't let it go. And I show it to students all the time. We just need to be nice until we can't be nice anymore, right? I mean, but don't give up on that avenue, right? That's the first avenue, right? I feel like we should always approach everything through the respectful lens before anything else, right?
Right.
Even in an adversarial position.
Always lead with kindness and compassion.
I think so, and I think you see that reflected in our firm and in the way we advertise and what we talk about. There's a lot of law firms, and that's the law firm brand, right? That's what you think of. We fight, and this firm fights, and we'll get the best results, and we're going to kick major ass for you. I'm like, yeah, that's a way to brand yourself, right? But I don't think that's my brand, right? And I can only be myself. And my brand is, I'm very smart. I'm a hard worker. I'm reasonable. And if you want fairness, if you want somebody who's going to help you solve your problem in a reasonable way, in the fastest way to get you back on track and get your problems taken care of, then I'm your guy. If you're looking for somebody who's going to beat their chest and bluster and waste your time and energy on some bullshit, that's not me, because I just don't do that, right? So I'm not the right fit for every client, and I know that. But I feel that most people that I encounter, most people who are in an accident, who've been hurt, who want to pay bills, just want fairness. I just want fairness. They don't want revenge, right? They don't necessarily need to crush people. Right? What does that even mean? Right? That's a bunch of bullshit too. But they just want to be treated fairly. And if lawyers on both sides just want what's fair to the people they represent, to the company or the insurance, even though sometimes those companies don't allow them to do that, right? Then we can get along. Let's be respectful and let's solve this problem in the fastest, most reasonable way possible.
Right. But how many attorneys, in your opinion, think along the same lines as you, as far as like wanting the fairness and leading with kindness and compassion?
I would say about half of them, right? It just depends. They do. The problem is they don't have that reputation, right? Because they don't think that sells, right? But I have great relationships with a lot of defense attorneys, right? And we see, because it's a small world, we see each other on the same cases all the time, right? There are outliers who certainly, and I don't even want to say outliers because it's probably 40, 50%, right? There's just different approaches to how you do this thing, right? And some firms are scorched earth. We don't play nice with everyone, and they believe that gets them better results. I don't think that gets them better results. I think it wastes a lot of time. I wouldn't call myself a pushover. I can be a tough son of a bitch, right? But
sure, you have to be.
You have to be.
Yeah.
But let's not start
like
meeting
that.
each other by, throwing punches before we even have a conversation. Like,
that's a wild place to start.
It's just so unnecessary,
right?
In my opinion, right? And I have people who I respect, right, who completely disagree with me, right? Like they just believe that the other side is the enemy and no quarter and all that, and that's, I respect that too, right? I can just be myself at the end of the day, right? And I've tried to be that guy, and it's just not me, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, sure, right? I can be that guy, and we're gonna fight, right? Patrick Swayze kicks ass in Roadhouse, right? There's no doubt about that, but that's not how he starts, right? Like, let's see where we can get, and then we can all be bastards to each other if we need to be, but let's not start from that position.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have a little saying that I, kind of live by. It's do no harm, but take no shit.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be in my PowerPoint for next year.
I think put my picture next to it.
Yeah, I will do that.
No, but it's true, right? Like I always try and lead with kindness and compassion, because like you said, we're humans and we're not all the same, and we all have different backgrounds and different motivations, and we just have just different things that we've experienced, and that's okay. But I agree with you. It's like, don't just start off with aggression. There's no need for that. You never know what somebody else is going through. So to lead with kindness is probably, I in my personal opinion, I think the best way to go. But yeah, like at the end of the day, if you've got to get, kind of, if you do have to beat your chest a little bit, like on the trial side, well, that's your job.
Sure.
Well,
I mean, by the time we get to trial, 90% of cases settle before trial, right? But if you're in trial, I mean, that's war, right? Trial's war. We're past
the nice talks.
Yeah. Now we're, communications, we're not communicating as much, where everybody's guns up, right? Like we're ready to go. But we're working that case for years before we get to trial, trying to resolve things, right? So let's, when it comes to, things like exchanging information or hiding the ball or being unfair or, lying in court, like we don't do any of that. But once we get to trial, like we're, definitely super aggressive when that happens. But there's so many ways to solve a problem.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. Then go there.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, trial's expensive. It's long. It's, it's risky. You never know what those 12 people are going to do with your case, how they're going to perceive your client or what they're going to think. So that's why most cases settle, because juries can go rogue. I mean, they really do. What convinces one person to be on one side versus the other is elusive, right? And we can pretend that we have all the skill in the world, but it's at times, a roll of the dice. And there's also a saying, right? Like the best cases don't go to trial, right? If you are 100% going to win and your person was heard and what's fair is fair, nobody wants to take that case to trial, right? Because you're going to lose. Nobody wants to lose in trial. And if you've got a case which isn't as strong, it's risky, right? Trial's risky. So it's oftentimes, the last resort if you're not getting fairness. I mean, sometimes you have no choice, right?
Right.
And you want to do your best to maximize your client's recovery. And if that means going to trial, then, let's go. We're trial lawyers. That's what we do. But oftentimes conflicts can be resolved way before that stage.
Yeah. Which is, probably the best route to go.
Yeah.
So what's like a common misconception that people have about lawyers and attorneys, and maybe not so much specifically within like personal injury, but just overall, what do people say that you're just like, no, that's not true?
It's the money thing, right? That's the biggest misconception. Everybody thinks lawyers are all rich, right? And they're just not. The vast majority of lawyers have, tons of bills to pay. They're ordinary people. They have families. It's not the glamour that you see perceived in shows sometimes. And it can be financially rewarding career, but for the most part, it's just ordinary, people doing a job and being paid well to do that job. But we're not all flying around in jets and getting picked up at the airport in Bentleys, That's just not real, And so the misperception, I think the biggest one about lawyers is that it's all about the money. And I feel that there's two reasons for that reputation, right? One is it's insurance companies, right? I mean, they're our main adversary, and they are the biggest, most powerful, richest companies in this country. And they control the legislature. They try to put forth laws that limit the ability of ordinary people to get into court, right? To make it harder for lawyers to represent them, whether that's, limiting what you can recover or how much money you have to spend to even get to court. And those are things that are systemic, right? That's controlled by the insurance company. And I'm not even talking about cases where, laws that say that make it harder to get money. I'm talking about laws that even make it harder to get in front of 12 ordinary people who decide that, right? Because ultimately it's 12 ordinary people sitting on that jury, right? And you see insurance companies talking about these, what they call excess verdicts, right? Giant, millions and millions awarded for BS claims or whatever, right? That's super, super rare. And they use those cases to limit how ordinary people get into court on an ordinary basis, right? Because they're a company, right? And if they can sensationalize these huge verdicts to prevent the little guy from getting into court against them, they're going to do that. And they're very successful, right? So there's this idea that these money-hungry shark, especially in my profession, right, personal injury, that it's all BS and we're just out trying to get money. But what you have to think about is every time you see one of those large verdicts or every time you see any verdict, that was because a lawyer pled his case to 12 ordinary working people, right? And if those people thought that that award was justified or that any award was justified, then there's a reason. And we sitting outside of the courtroom who don't see the evidence, who don't see what happened, it's hard to judge that, right? Because all we see is, hot coffee got spilled on somebody and they got awarded, $20 million or something. What they didn't see was the company who was cutting all these corners or doing these things, or that had been warned time after time after time that they were going to hurt somebody and they didn't care because it was about money for them, right? So when you're able to get into court and put the facts and the story in front of 12 ordinary people, 9 times out of 10, they're going to get it right. So it's not a lawyer who is in there money grabbing, right? It's 12 ordinary people that thought this award is justified for this X, Y, and Z reason, right? So they have a bad reputation. One prong, right, is that prong of the insurance lobby and the myths that they've created around how the legal system works, right? That's one reason lawyers have a terrible reputation. There's not a day that goes by where somebody doesn't introduce me and say, "Oh, this is Steven, he's an attorney," and somebody goes, "Oh, you're one of those people."
Jeez.
Right? And they all say it as a joke, right? Everybody tries to be cute about it, right? But like, that's my job, bro. Like, I'm just like, that's how we're going to start. Like, okay, what do you do?
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow. But it happened literally at a party before I got here.
Right.
It happened last week. That's just a myth, right? But on top of that, you have another subset of lawyers who think that's how you get clients, right? That people are only interested in monies, right? I mean, you've seen the billboards, $1 billion, $10 million here, like, and they're hoping to convince people that they can, that means that they are the best lawyer or whatever, right? But it's chest beating by that side of the bar too, right? So it's hard to convince people that we are not money grubbing leeches, right? When you have people on billboards that say $1 billion, right? Or when the commercial for your business is you getting out of a private plane into a Bentley. I'm like, okay, dude, but that's not me. That's not my brand. That's not what I stand for. And that's just not the reality of what I do day to day. And so when we talk to juries in jury selection, that's one of the big things we talk about, right? The perception of lawyers. And, I have to spend a whole 30 minutes convincing people that I'm not those guys on the billboard, right? That we're here for fairness and we're here for justice. And it's an uphill battle oftentimes.
How do you flip that perception? I know you said it's kind of an uphill battle for you, but like what does that look like for you in your marketing compared to like the giant billboards that we see all the time?
So, to be completely candid, Nina, and we're on the Candid podcast, right? So yes. I'll just be honest with you. I don't know, right? I'm only trying what I'm trying, right? And so what we're trying to do with our marketing, which is social media, is to just be myself, to not beat my chest so much, to give practical advice like I would to my students about life and not necessarily about the law, a little bit about the law, a little bit about whatever, whether it's anxiety or confidence or whatever, just kind of being myself. And we've been doing it for a little while and it's successful to a certain amount, but I'm not, I just have to be honest. We're a small firm. We're not a big advertising firm, but there's firms spending $1 million a month, right? $250,000 a month. We don't have that budget, right? So I'd like to say, and I'd like to come on your podcast and tell you like, we do it different because we're better. But if I had $1 million a month to spend on marketing, I don't know, man. You might see me up there talking about kicking ass and $1 billion verdicts. Like, I don't know. I'd like to think I wouldn't just because that's not my brand. But I don't have that kind of budget. So I don't have those questions those questions are so far out of left field for me because I don't know what I would do with $1 million a month budget. You know, I'd like to think that I'd stay true to myself, but you know, once you're spending that kind of money, you start hearing from the consultants and, you know, okay, you need this and you need a gimmick and you need go stand on a semi and here's a hammer and a blowtorch and all that shit, right? And does it work? I don't know. It seems to be successful for those guys, right? So I don't want to judge them either, right? Like, I don't want to just come on here and talk a bunch of shit about the big advertising lawyers because they're very successful, right? And they're doing what they do and they have to believe in their own brand, right? And obviously at a certain point they do and they buy in and that's why they are who they are, right? But at this point in my little 4-year-old firm's existence, we're not there. We don't have to make those choices. So all we can do is just be what do I want to hear? You know, what would I listen to somebody on social media? What do I want to see? Right. It's difficult. It's difficult, but those are the choices with it we struggle with. Right. And the choices that are interesting to me right now at this level of my career. Right. Cause I'm like, okay, now small business marketing, how do we get into that? You know, how do I, you know, meet cool people that are going to put me on podcasts, right? I mean, that's part of the what's interesting to me at this point in my career.
Well, I know that you've also really increased your digital presence on social media. I've been watching, you know, you create stories, you create reels, and you're really kind of diving into some educational type things. How has that, have you seen any increase from that presence?
It's working. You know, I definitely hear people talking and people want to talk about that to me. Right. So I know people are watching or even people that I don't know will like, hey, you know, your friend shared your reel or I saw your reel or you tagged this person or whatever. Right. So I know we're getting out there, but we've only been doing it really a heavy push for a couple months. And that's all about consistency, right? It's going to the gym.
Yes.
So I don't really feel like I'm going to see the results that I want until we're like a year or two into it. It
takes a lot of time.
Right.
It takes a lot of time. I mean, I do digital marketing for another organization. And I mean, we didn't really start seeing the fruits of our labor until maybe like a year or two in.
Right.
Like really, really seeing what that turnaround looks like. But yeah, you're right. It's all about the consistency. And I love a lot of the content that you're pushing out right now, though. I like that some of it's very inspirational, but some of it's also like educational. So question on that then is there any kind of like a common misconception that people have about the law? Or is there anything that maybe there's a law that they don't know about that you would give them advice on?
You know, if legally speaking, I think the biggest advice in what I do that I could tell people is, you know, check your insurance coverage, right? You don't know how many clients that come in here into my office and say, you know, I have full coverage. Full coverage doesn't, like, there's nothing that exists called full coverage, right? Like you can walk in and that's just a word that we've been taught to say over and over, but like full coverage, what does that mean, right? So be sure that you have enough coverage, you know, liability coverage, right? But most people run around with liability coverage because that's all they need because that's inexpensive. But if an uninsured motorist hits you, you're done, right? Like how are you going to pay for your car? How are you going to do that, right? So you need uninsured or underinsured protection, right? The coverage on top of the liability that everybody's required. And nobody's required to buy that, but I highly suggest everybody get that. Also gap insurance if you have a loan on your car because it's so unfortunate when people get hit by an uninsured driver and, you know, their car's totaled.
Right.
They don't have any kind of uninsured or gap insurance, right? So they have to continue making car payments on a car that they are not using anymore. And it's so
terrible.
tragic. I mean, talk about an issue that pisses people off.
Yeah.
You're like, what do you mean? I have to keep making payments to the bank for a car that no longer exists. And no longer, I don't get to drive it. So uninsured motorist protection and gap insurance are, you know.
That's in addition to say
your regular liability insurance.
Okay.
Hey, like you have, and it's a little more expensive, but
sure.
You know, but it's worth it because you don't want to be stuck out in that situation without that coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Because I don't think I have. I was about to say I need to check it.
And gap insurance is for when, even if the person does have insurance, but, you know, you buy, let's say, a new vehicle, right? As soon as you drive it off the lot, it depreciates immediately, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you drive it off, you took out a loan for, you know, I don't know, $20,000 to buy the car. I mean, that's not realistic, right? You're taking out a lot more to buy a car these days, but let's just say $20,000. You leave the lot, and it's worth $15,000. You get in a wreck, the insurance company values it. Oh yeah, that was worth $15,000, but you're still paying on that $20,000 loan, right? So that's what gap insurance is for, to make up the gap that you still owe to the bank from what you get paid from an insurance company. So,
wow.
Uninsured motorist protection, gap insurance, everybody needs it.
Okay, I will now. I really want to grab my phone and look to see. No, because my truck is super old. It's paid off, so it's like I just have.
Yeah, so you don't need gap insurance.
Okay.
Yeah, but you might need uninsured.
Uninsured. What's it called?
Uninsured/underinsured protection. So if somebody hits you, right, you can make a claim for your vehicle on your own insurance. You're paying for that coverage, right? Or your hospital bills, right? Let's say you get in a wreck with an uninsured person, you have to go to the hospital. Then you can use your own insurance to pay for that. Right.
I've been super lucky, I think. Yeah. Just not. I'm gonna knock on.
Yeah, knock on some wood.
Knock on some wood.
So. It's hard. That's why. Yeah, and in getting back to the marketing topic, that's why it's hard to market for personal injury other than the chest beating thing, right? Mm-hmm. And to know that, the conventional wisdom on social media marketing, I'm sure right, is like become a subject matter expert and put all these tips. And so there's a lot of lawyers out there putting out 3 things to do if you're in a car wreck. Here's what to do if you slip and fall, right? But nobody pays any attention to that shit because nobody ever believes they're going to be in a wreck, right? It's not like other areas of the law, right? Like immigration, criminal defense, wills and estates, right? Those, my buddy's an immigration lawyer. He's got over 250,000 TikTok followers, right? Because he's constantly talking about immigration and the changing laws, and people that are going through that process go to social media for that information, right? People that, got arrested for DWI are on, TikTok, Instagram looking for tips on that. But nobody goes for tips on what happens if I get in an accident because nobody believes they're ever going to be in an accident, right? That's not me. That's not something I'm going through. And then they do get in an accident and they make a decision in 24 hours who they're going to hire, but they're not out there searching for clues, tips on what happens, right? Like it's there. I need to hire a lawyer. Boom. So if you're not branded and in their head before they need you, right, then you're done, right? So in my opinion, the best strategy is just attention for, the good reasons, right? Whatever your brand is, right? Attention, just get out there. Yeah.
Well, going back to your social media, I think you did one post and it was like, what was it? It was like, what's like the first thing you should do? And it was like you and your new hire and y'all were like talking about what's the first thing you should do when you get into an accident? Because like, I always have those questions and I've been really fortunate, like that. I have been in a couple of accidents before, but like, I've never really been injured. I have a truck. Yeah. So like I had someone like rear end me one time and my truck was fine. And their car was jacked. Yeah. But it was their fault. It was 100% their fault. It was proven. There was video evidence and the whole 9. But it's just like, for me, the first thing I do is I just start taking pictures. Yeah. That's the first thing right? Because also like my photography brain is just like, I'm not going to remember this. I need to have evidence that this happened. Sure. So what would you say to people who are in an accident? Like, what's the first thing you should do?
Yeah, take photos, obviously get everybody's information, call the police, get a police report for sure, and go get checked out somewhere, right? If you're feeling anything at all, if it's a big enough hit, go get checked out because when insurance companies evaluate cases, if you don't see a medical professional, whatever, urgent care, chiropractor, whatever you want to do in the first 48 hours, it diminishes the value of your claim. They're going to think you weren't hurt. Right. Which is boneheaded logic, right? Because in most soft tissue injuries, sprain neck, sprain back, you're not going to feel those injuries for 48 hours. Right.
Because your adrenaline's running and you're like, this thing just happened. Yeah.
Exactly. And your biggest concern, right? Most people's concern, right, is not like, they're like, oh my God, how am I going to get my car back on the road? How am I going to get to work? Right? How am I going to pick up my kid from school? Like that's my car, right? That's people's lifeline. If you don't have a car in cities like ours, you're screwed, right? So that is everybody's worry, and it's not till days later, and they're like, you know what? My sore neck never went away, or that pain I was feeling in my back, I thought it was going to go away. They said it was going to go away in a couple of days, and it never did. And now you're a week away from the accident, going to somebody for the first time, and the insurance company's like, red flag, you weren't hurt. Now you're just trying to get money, right? Which is complete bullshit. Yeah. But that's the argument they make every time. So if you're a little sore, if you're a little worried, just run into an urgent care right away and document that you were in this accident. You know, they'll probably give you some prescriptions for, you know, muscle relaxers or something just to help you. In case it gets bigger a week later, you're already trying to do the right thing, and you won't be up against a wall when the insurance company starts trying to cut you out of paying for your bills.
Yeah. That's scary.
Yeah. No, it happens.
All the time, obviously.
All the time.
Right?
Yeah.
So they should just call you. And
they should. Yeah, they should. But, you know.
Like, I know that the rewarding part obviously keeps you going, but just from our entire conversation, it's very taxing. And it's probably extremely taxing both mentally, but also physically. So what are some things that you do to help with like your mental health, your physical health, to kind of keep you from going through what others would probably say is burnout? And how do you teach that to your students?
Sure. So, I mean, burnout is real, right? In any profession, in any job, even, right? I mean, ordinary jobs are stressful, right? We live in a society and in a system that requires us to work quite a bit to even survive. So that it's everybody, right? So burnout is real. It's especially real in the legal profession. Lawyers, the highest rate of drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and suicide. Any profession, you know, studies have shown that year after year after year, because it's very stressful, and for the reasons I've talked about, right? Because it's adversarial, right? It's combat, right? You go to work every day against people versus people, right? It's not chill. It can be very stressful. We're dealing with people, you know, not only on the other side, but our clients are stressed out, right? We're dealing with people who are going through some real problems and the most stressed out situations of their life, right? And there's only so much we can do, right? And we do our best to help them, but a lot of times they're upset with us too, because the whole thing is unfair, right? The way they have to jump through all these hoops is unfair. And how come it can't happen fast? And it's obvious this person was at fault. Why aren't my bills getting paid? Why are we having to fight this for a year or two, right? It's because the system is unfair to ordinary people. So yeah, that's super stressful. The way that I try to avoid burnout, you know, I exercise regularly. I try to have hobbies. I teach, you know, teaching for me helps my profession, but it's also for me a passion. I love working with young people who aren't burnt out yet, who aren't jaded, who still see the law as a noble profession, right? Who haven't got smacked in the face with the reality of what work really is, right? In not only in the legal profession, but in any profession. A lot of my students have not joined the workforce yet. So I also recommend that, you know, they take some time and go work in the real world before going to grad school. I tell everybody that, to have that perfection experience. Everybody should be in the service industry, I think, at least once in their life.
I agree with that.
You know,
wait some tables, people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do. You know, I just work out. I help students who inspire me. And, you know, lately just trying to get into more hobbies, let it go, church, you know, things like that. Just kind of take your mind off the stress. Because we could, like most professions, right? I mean, you could work around the clock if you wanted to.
Sure.
Right? If you had the energy to not sleep. I mean, it never ends. And you have to just realize that, hey, it's never going to end. You have to draw some boundaries, you know, and take some time for yourself.
And I think you and I were talking yesterday, you were really passionate about discussing the work-life balance and what that means. It doesn't necessarily mean what other people think it means. So we talked about it's not feasible to have like a 50-50 work-life balance. Like you talked about seasons. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit and explain?
Sure. So, you know, my philosophy and, you know, reading books about it and stuff is, you know, everything has its season. And seasons even within a year, right? But I feel like too many young people, you know, and I give a lot of advice to young lawyers trying to enter the workforce, right? Where should I go work? What should I do? Who should my mentors be? And I feel like there's been a disservice to them in the last 20 years, right? Talking about the importance of a work-life balance, because it is important, but I don't think it's talked about the right way. I feel like at least the students that I encounter, when their idea of a work-life balance is, I clock out at 5 and I go to the gym, right? Or I clock out at 5 and I go to happy hours with my friends. I mean, that's just not the job you're in, right? We're not in a 9-to-5 profession, right? And when you're needed and you have to work, right? So the way I see work-life balance is in seasons, right? And it's certain seasons in your young career, you're trying to establish yourself professionally, you've got to work, right? You've got to be Johnny on the spot for your bosses and your mentors, and you have to give everything, right? I mean, like I just said about law school, right? Like I don't really think you should, in my opinion, I don't think you should have a work-life balance in law school. Like you should be all about law school. I mean, and you can have fun at law school and with your law school friends, but that should be your microcosm, right? That should be your world it's only 3 years, right? So dive into that, right? The same thing when you're starting a new job as a young lawyer, like you've got to burn the midnight oil. Like you just have to do that. Now there's certain levels, right? Like you can't work so hard that you let other parts of your life get to zero, right? Like don't let your health tank get to zero. You have to at least remain physically active to some level, right? But in a certain season, getting abs should not be a priority over doing a good job at work or completing your tasks or doing that, right? There's certain time, right? As you get older, as you get a family, okay, family starts taking more priority, but that doesn't necessarily mean your work tank can go to zero, right? So there's just different seasons, right? As you get older, and your family starts to grow. Okay, I can get into more hobbies now to keep my work-life balance, right? But the family tank can't go to zero, right? And the work tank can't go to zero. So you just have to maintain that work-life balance by realizing, hey, we've got this coming up for this next 3 months. Like I'm going to be all about work, and yes, I'm going to work out, and yes, I'm going to be there for my family, but I have to prioritize this like right now, right? Okay, well, my child is going through these formative years or struggling with these issues at school or with, whatever. This is my family season, for the next 3 months or whatever. And you can talk about seasons in years or in times, right? Like early in your career, heavy work season, mid-career, trying to establish your family and how am I going to make that secure? And then, your season of, yourself, right? Like leaning more back on doing things that you enjoy, right? And there's also like a self-discovery season, right? Like, which I think is before you get into the workplace or before that becomes stressful. Your 20 should be a time when you're exploring, discovering yourself, and then as you get out of that season, you gotta, if you want to be well regarded and respected in your career, you have to have that season of I'm gonna kick ass at work season,
right? Yeah, that's such an interesting way to kind of discuss, especially from your perspective as an attorney, because I normally hear people talk about work-life balance. It is like, I clock out at 5, I go to the gym, I spend time with my kids, and I think that's kind of different for every profession. But yeah, I know you and I discussed briefly about how your students just they just don't know that yet. So to have that perspective, 10, 12 years into your career, I think is important, like for them, because you're giving them this advice and saying, hey, like, it doesn't necessarily look like what you think it looks like. This is kind of what it has to be in order to be a successful attorney.
I think it's a disservice to everyone the way we talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what we think of when we think of work-life balance. Is like I clock out and I'm no longer on the clock, and that's it. And I don't think many jobs, I mean, I'm not even talking about professional jobs. I'm like as a lawyer, doctor, plumbers, electricians, right? Like, I mean, they don't clock out at 5 either, right? You got to, after hours leak, somebody's got to go do that, right? I mean, that's not a job that you can do that with either, right? And I don't think there's a lot of jobs like that. So many students that come in and they see lawyers burning out, right? And they're always talked, and we give them tons of lectures, right? There's all these resources about how not to get addicted to drugs, how not to get addicted. Don't look for drugs and alcohol to cure your burnout, work-life balance. You have to, get time for yourself. And so the students who have no experience will say, well, I'm not going to go to this firm because they have their first year associates. Or, I mean, I talked to this guy and he worked 60 hours, 80 hours last week, you know? And I'm like, yeah, but he's trying to get to another level. And I just think everything is so much more gray than black and white, right? So I also tell coaching students, like, hey, like, don't miss an opportunity because you have this idea of work-life balance and that's going to be so fulfilling, right? That you're going to miss opportunities in your career to get to that next level because you believe, hey, I should work 40 hours and clock out at 5. Like that's just not what we do. And I don't think that's what many people do. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I think honestly, I think it depends on the profession. I could see where, like, for y'all, doctors, obviously. But yeah, I think there's a lot of professions that it's just, you don't clock out at 5. Yeah.
But most professions now, right? I mean, what does every high school kid want to be, right? An influencer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, influencers don't clock out.
No, but
right?
also too,
like all those jobs. Like, I feel like most jobs these days are now like,
yeah, but
I mean, you've got to be working.
But does that make it right? You know what I mean? Like I have pretty strict boundaries around my job, my 9 to 5, right? Because this isn't my 9 to 5. It'd be nice if it was, but that's just not the reality for me right now. I still have to work a full-time job, but because I have such a robust life outside of that job, I have a family. I have 2 beautiful children. I have this passion project that I'm working on. And for me, it is very much like I am giving you this amazing work ethic for 40 hours a week. My weekends are mine. My time after 5 is mine. And I feel like I have to kind of hold those boundaries because, to your point, if I don't, I do feel like it's take, right? If I don't put those boundaries up, then yes, I think it would be very easy for me to work until past dinner on the weekends. But I don't, I think I'm just not in a position right now. Like, I'm kind of established in that way where it's like, hey, like, this is what I'm giving you. I'm doing more in these 40 hours than you might get from somebody else who's a little newer. But yeah, that's just my perspective. I understand, like, from your perspective where it's like, no, like, I have these clients and they're depending on me. And when I was working for myself and I wasn't working for an organization, absolutely.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Like, what if you didn't have the 9 to 5 and this was all you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. Of course.
You would be podcasting till midnight every night.
I would be dreaming about it. Right. Yeah, because that's how it was for me when I did. Because I have my own LLC and that was my full-time job for several years. But before I moved into the nonprofit sector, but yeah, it absolutely was. I mean, weekends, nights. I mean, in the morning I'm getting up and I'm working on things. So yeah, I mean, I get it. But I think it's beneficial. For me, it was like that made sense, right? Because I'm working for myself.
Right. But but you got to have seasons for that too, right?
Yes.
Like, I work for myself too, right? And I'm like, okay, like these 3 months are going to be really crazy. Like, don't.
Oh yeah, because I had busy seasons. Right. Yes.
And so even when you're working on your own, you got to take care of yourself, right? I don't think. I mean, I guess my point is not that anybody is doing it right or wrong. I think it's the way we think about it.
Okay.
Right? Like, the way, it's just the concept of work-life balance has to be talked about in a different way so that you don't feel guilty or feel like you're missing out, right? So that you're not like, oh, I'm a workaholic and therefore I have to throw my family life or hobby life away. Or my biggest priority is my family. So I'm not going to do the best at my career, right? Like, you can do both if you decide to have seasons about it, right? But I guess the way I want to talk about it is more like an identity, right? Like, it's not an identity. Like, you can't say, I'm a person that identifies as a family first person, therefore my work is going to suffer. Right. Or I am a person who is all about work, therefore my family's going to go to shit. Right. Like, that's the balance, is that you can do both. You just have to realize that you have to give your all in certain seasons. Right. Yeah. It can't be 50-50 every day of the week.
Yeah.
You know?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think in my profession, there's definitely these really heavy seasons where it's like, okay, like we have a calendar of events and I know that I'm going to be working over 40 hours potentially, right? Like doing all of these things. But those are discussions that I have like with my kids and all of that. Like, hey, like mommy has to go to work. These are the things that I'm doing, but on this weekend, we're going to do this.
Right. You understand that, right?
Yeah.
So that when you're in that busy season of work, you're not shitting on yourself saying, I'm a terrible mom. I should be this. I miss soccer practice
I mean, like
or whatever.
There's still some of that, right?
Sure,
like
sure.
The mom guilt is so real.
Yeah. But like getting to the point where you're like, oh, like sacrifices are made on both sides at certain times, right?
Yeah.
And so just avoiding the self-hate for choosing either one in a certain moment of your life, right? That it's not all or nothing, right? You're not either I'm only a family person or I'm only a work person, right? Like you can have both, but you have to understand how you're going to get that done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And I think as, you know, well, for me as a single parent, it's like, okay, I don't have the same life as like someone with a partner, right? And I think that's important to establish, especially as a career person. Like I'm very much focused on my career right now, but I have my 2 children, you know, my daughter, she's in high school, but my son is still very young. And so, but both of them need me so much right now in 2 very different ways. And so for me, it's like, okay, I know that this is my season right now of focusing on my kids and giving them the best of me because they need that from me right now. And so career-wise, what that means is that I'm like, okay, now I have to kind of have these very strict boundaries on the jobs that I choose and the type of work that I choose to, you know, to take. Like if I'm taking, you know, a gig or I'm taking on a new client, it's like, what is the time commitment for that? Because I got these 2 people over here that need me very, very much. So yeah, I agree with you. It's like I don't think people understand it in that way of like these seasons, because we move and ebb and flow in these seasons. Like once my kids, you know, once my son gets a little older, believe me, heavy, heavy, heavy on the career, heavy on the long hours. Because I know like, you know, I'm not a workaholic, but I love to work. I love working things that I love doing. So yeah, it's just interesting. I'm glad that you touched on that because I feel like people don't necessarily think of it that way, especially in your industry. And I think it's important for students to hear that, for your students to hear that, especially young people now may not have that reality because then they go out into the workforce and it just kind of smacks them in the face.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of the way they've been taught to think about work-life balance, right? And I think you've got to think about it different. And it's not just family versus, I mean, is it right? Maybe your kids grow up and it's your season of travel or something, you know, like it's self-discovery. Let me take up something. Let me do something that's fulfilling for me, right? I mean, that's important too. It's not just family or work. It's not just obligations. It's work-life balance and things that make your life worth living, right?
Yeah, meaningful and what's important to you. No, I'm glad we talked about that because I feel like that's something that people don't often think about in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of want to move into rapid fire really quickly.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm a little nervous.
What?
Yeah. Okay, go.
Okay. So favorite legal drama was it totally on point or was it like not at all?
Oh, there's no legal dramas that are on point.
Yeah.
Because it's so boring.
Yeah.
You know, like even trials are boring. I mean, juries fall asleep all the time. But my favorite legal drama is A Few Good Men.
Okay.
I love that movie. Just the interplay of the courtroom drama and the military is super fascinating to me. I really enjoy that one. I used to watch Suits when Suits came out, when it was on USA before all these like Gen Zers started watching it in the last 2 years. Like Suits came out like in 2006 or 7 or something like.
Yeah.
I was on board with that show like way 20 years ago.
So Suits and
A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men. Okay. But none of them were accurate.
Oh, zero.
Zero accuracy. All right. If you could have dinner with any historical legal figure, who would it be?
Wow. I have no idea. You know, a historical legal figure.
Mm-hmm. If you have any favorites or.
I love John Adams, right, was a president, but I just admire like what he stands for. The right to trial by jury, the right for people to be represented by lawyers is super important. And he understood that the right to counsel is a right that everybody should enjoy. And if we stand on our principles, then everybody gets a lawyer because the system needs to work the right way. And so he, against all advice and against all, people hated him for that. And he said, this is an important principle that our country's founded on. And that's what I'm going to do.
So what's one law you wish more people understood?
I'm going to focus this one very heavily on what I do. So there's this law, it's Texas Rule of Evidence. I think it's 411. I try to talk about it a lot, that the insurance lobby has passed in most states across the country. Jurors, when they're deciding a case, a civil case, aren't told whether there's insurance, right? So let's say you and I get into a wreck, and so my lawyer is accusing you of hurting me, right? And I've got all these bills that I have to pay. Well, because that law is in place, the jurors don't know you've got insurance, right? So they think that if they award me money, that it's coming out of your pocket. But it's coming out of an insurance company's pocket. So really what we're doing is we're fighting insurance companies all the time. But when push comes to shove and we get in trial, people think that we are trying to take money from you, Nina Padilla, and State Farm, who's just being a son of a bitch and trying to do my client wrong, right? So I always tell people, look, if you're on a jury, if you're in a courtroom and there's lawyers involved and there's lawyers defending that person, somebody's paying them. And if you think that person is a little old lady that doesn't have any money or a 19-year-old student that doesn't have any money, you're right. But there's a big, bad insurance company that's paying those lawyers to try to screw my client. So, try not to let that factor weigh into your decision on whether compensation should be awarded to my clients, because we're not really taking money from that person that's sitting across from us.
Right.
It's the big, bad insurance company that is paying for those lawyers, paying for that defense, not only trying to screw my client, but screwing their own client, because now their client has to sit in a courtroom for 2 weeks in a trial and take time out of their day because their insurance company doesn't want to pay what's fair.
Wow. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, that's a good one. So if you're on a jury and you're in trial and there's lawyers, somebody's paying them. It's usually not the little old lady that's sitting on the other side.
Oh, man. So if you could break any law, what would it be?
If I could break a law?
Yeah, any law. If you could just break it, what would it be?
Jaywalking. I think jaywalking.
Jaywalking?
I don't know.
You just have a desire to jaywalk?
I just hate having to go all the way to the corner. I just want to cross the damn street, man.
Just run in between traffic.
Yeah, they're not so bad about it here, but when I first moved to LA, they're serious about jaywalking over there. Like a little, there'll be like a cop somewhere and you'll just like cross the street in like this boutique-y little neighborhood where there's shops, and you're just like crossing the street, like you'll get talked to. Like they'll come up to you and be like, I'm going to give you a ticket, or here's your warning. Like, really? Don't jaywalk. I'm like,
have you ever gotten a ticket here for jaywalking?
Jaywalking? No. Have you?
No.
Yeah, no, I don't think they have much in Texas.
Yeah.
But
I didn't know that was a thing.
California, they sure do.
Until I was a little I think in high school.
Yeah, it's almost
what do you mean? Yeah. Like, what is that? What is jaywalking?
Yeah, for real. I think.
Like you just don't, not everybody just runs across the street in between cars? You don't do that?
I mean, I guess it's a lot safer if we did follow the laws, but sometimes it's unnecessary.
I agree. Because what if there are no cars?
Yeah. No, I mean, there'd be like no cars and I'd cross the street and like a cop would threaten me with a ticket.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the best piece of advice anyone has ever given you as a lawyer?
Oh, man. The number one advice that I think we can give everyone is just to be yourself, right? To realize that you can bring yourself to any profession, any job, any career. And that's the only way that you can do it, right? Don't try to shove yourself into somebody else's way of doing things. That's number one. Number two is you have to find your tribe. You just have to find that kitchen cabinet, those 5 people that you're going to go to for everything in your career, not only in life. I have a group of, 5 or 6 lawyers that, I mean, they're my family, right? They're my friends, and we try to get together once a month at least to have dinner. And there's other mentors that I have that I try to get together with them quite often, just because you need advice, but you also need to know that you're not in it alone, that the problems that you're experiencing are common. Right. Because in any profession, I think you can you can believe that you are doing something wrong, that you're having issues in your career or in your job because you're doing something wrong.
Right.
And then you start focusing on yourself and what am I doing wrong? Am I a bad lawyer? Am I a bad business person? And you need those people to ground you to say, oh, I had this problem too. Or, oh, you should have heard how bad I screwed that up 3 years ago, right? And just so it's not only you need the advice on like people who have experience, but you also just need that reassurance that you're not alone, that you're not doing it wrong, right? So that you can sleep at night and be like, look, I screwed this up. I did this. I did that. I'm facing some challenges here, but I'm doing it the right way. I'm like, these are just things that happen and not things that are happening because I'm doing something wrong.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's important to have those relationships.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I love that we've been able to get candid about this. I mean, I don't know anything about, lawyering or attorneys, so it's really been enlightening for me.
Yeah, no, it's been good. Thanks so much. And obviously once you get a lawyer talking, it's hard to get them to stop. So, thanks for letting me word vomit for an hour and a half.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. No, you're welcome. And thank you for being on the show. Tell people where they can follow you and where they can find you and hire you and all of that.
Sure. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook Instagram is at Lopez Law TX and Facebook is Lopez Law Firm. I think if you just search for that. And then my personal Instagram is Steven A. Lopez. We're on TikTok as Injury Attorney Steven Lopez, I think.
And if people want to hire you, they can just go to lopezlaw.com.
lopezlawtx.com.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I want to thank Chibi again for producing this amazing show. You're fabulous.
My pleasure. I learned a lot. Thank you. I'm gonna give you $1 before we leave, so I'll keep you on a retainer.
Just give me a call. Thanks so much.
Personal
and thanks for your
injury
work
retainer.
today.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for listening. We will see you back here next time. And this has been Candid and Curious.